Okay, welcome everyone. Nice to see you all. We have a lot to discuss this evening. We're going to take a deep dive into something which I think most of you have never done before. But we're going to have to start with the parasha, what's happening, one part of it, pretty much one line, and then we're going to jump into a completely different book of Tanakh, as is my custom, or it was over the summer. So let's start with the backstory. We know that Jacob, Jacob Avinu, and Esav, Esau, were twin brothers. We know that Jacob took the birthright, which Esav sold for a bowl of lentils to Jacob. Jacob was then threatened by Esav's existence. He went and he studied for 14 years. He then left Israel. He became Mr. Exile, Mr. Galut. We spoke in the past about everything that Jacob does is all a sign for the future exiles of the Jewish people. Actually, the angels that he saw on the ladder, Jacob's ladder, were there representing the future exiles that his descendants would go through. That's us, the Jewish people. And so he moves out and he lives with his uncle Lavan, who was the biggest criminal, trickster, Ponzi scheme guy that's ever existed. And he was there for 20 years. And he married these women, Rachel and Leah, and he also had two other wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. That's how it was in those days. And he has many children, the future tribes of Israel. And then he makes his way back to Israel, because God said, it's time. Now you've made your families, and you made your parnassah, you made your great wealth, which he did while living with Lavan. Even though Lavan cheated him every single day for 20 years, he still managed to amass a fortune. No matter what a person does to you, in the end, it's God's decision who gets wealth and who doesn't. And so he makes his way back to the land of Israel. But he goes a very specific route. And this was done deliberately. This was not a coincidence. He goes via a place called Seir. Mount Seir. That's what the Torah tells us. Mount Seir wasn't just any mountain. It was the mountain and the area that his twin brother Esav lived, resided in, and controlled. Why? Why would Yaakov Avinu, when he goes back home after leaving for 20 years, now that he's older, 20 years older, supposedly 20 years wiser, which of course he was, with children, wives, and servants, and flocks, why would he go such a dangerous route to return to the land of Israel? And the short answer is because he felt that at that moment he would be able to interact with his twin brother. His twin brother would see that he didn't become anything very important in this world. In the next world he did, but not in this world. And he thought he'd be able to bring his brother back, make peace with him, and create a new partnership. That was his plan. The plan did not work. As he starts to approach this area, he sends messengers, which, by the way, the rabbis tell us were actually angels, in order to intimidate Esav a little bit. He had the power to control angels, whatever that means, and he sends them off as messengers to give information over to Esav that I'm coming and I want to meet with you. Esav's response was, I'm coming with 400 of my best soldiers. It's not sounding good. And so this meeting of Yaakov and Esav already is off not to a great start. But Yaakov does not give up. He understands his brother, his twin brother, very well, and he organizes that his brother should receive gifts, and lots of them, because he knows his brother Esav is into stuff. And so he buys, well, he doesn't buy, he has gold and silver and jewels and all these other precious items that he sends vast amount of, and he does it piece by piece. Not just one big load of gifts, but one load and then another load, and then he starts to give more gifts and cattle, and he starts sending him all the gifts in the world. And then he prays to God that he should be successful, and as a last resort, he prepares for war, because it could be that Esav has not given up on his hatred. As Esav approaches him, Yaakov bows down. He gives him tremendous honor. So now he's given him money, he's given him wealth, he's prayed, and he's giving him all the kavod that Esav obviously needs, and he manages at that moment to calm him down. And Esav sees Yaakov has got this big extended family, which Esav at this point is not surrounded by, and he says, who's this? And he introduces the various people in the family. We're told that Yaakov hid away his daughter Dinah. Dinah he hides away. He didn't want Esav to see her because he was scared that maybe he'd see her and be like, oh, I'll marry her too. By the way, I know it sounds crazy, but Yaakov is faulted for doing that, because Dinah was such an incredible, spiritual, powerful woman that the rabbis tell us that had Dinah married Esav, there was a chance that she could have turned around Esav when Yaakov himself couldn't. That's the power of a good spiritual Jewish woman. She could have done it. But Yaakov didn't want to take the chance, so he hid Dinah away so that Esav did not see her. And he's faulted for that. But we'll leave that aside. So now this big come together happens, and they hug and they weep because they still have this brotherly love, although there's a great tension that exists between them. Okay. The meeting ends, and then supposedly they're meant to go together to this mountain we're speaking about, called Mountain of Seir. And Jacob said to him, I would travel with you, but I'm going slowly. I got women, I got children, I've got a lot of flocks and sheep and cattle. You go ahead. And Esau said, no, I'll walk slowly with you. And Yaakov said, no. I'm going to take too much time. He says, you go ahead, and I'm going to come and meet my master at the final destination in Seir. I'll meet you there. And they part ways. I think never to see each other again. And if you look at the remaining Pesukim in the parasha, they never actually meet again in Seir. What? Didn't Yaakov just say to Esav, you know what? You go ahead, I'll follow behind you, and we'll meet each other at this place, Seir. But they never did. And that's the end of the story. And that's all we get. And then it talks about the descendants of Esav and who they are and what happens to Yaakov later on, all the family stuff and all the drama that happens in their separate lives. But what about this meeting? Where is this meeting of Esav, the father of Edom? Where does it go? Now that is a really, really important question. Before I answer that question for you, and I'm going to, please God, using my sources this evening, I want to just point out one descendant, because at the end of the parasha, it starts to name and list all the descendants of Esav. Most of them you won't recognize, but one you will. These are the descendants of Esav, the father of Edom. Esav is considered to be the father of Edom, the Edomites. This nation, who we're going to see, are going to cause a lot of trouble to the Jewish people right through history and their descendants. And who are they? So Esav had a son whose name was Eliphaz. Has anyone heard of Eliphaz?
He's the one who stole from Yaakov.
He was involved with Yaakov already. He took all the goods and he stole a lot of money. He was meant to kill Yaakov. Very good. He was meant to kill Yaakov, but he didn't. He stole all of his money instead because Yaakov treated Eliphaz very, very well. And Eliphaz had a wife, but he also had children. And the children he had through one wife whose name was Timnah, the name of that child was Amalek. So now it's getting interesting. And there's many other people who come from this nation, but it seems like Amalek, that very, very famous person who's going to have a lot of descendants, who are going to cause us so much trouble throughout Jewish history. And it's going to happen when we leave Egypt. And it's going to happen when we enter into Israel. And Saul is going to have to deal with them. And David HaMelech, Shaul HaMelech, and David HaMelech have to deal with them. And it doesn't go away. And it's going to go right through till the end of days. That Amalek, the descendants of Esav, are going to cause us trouble. But what about that meeting? What about the meeting between Jacob and Esav that was meant to happen? They said it's going to happen. If it says in the Torah it's going to happen, it must happen. So in order to figure that out, we have to jump to a very famous person in Tanakh who has an entire book. It's a very, very, very short book. There are only 21 verses in this book, and his name was Ovadia. Ovadia the prophet. Ovadia the prophet. He was a very interesting individual. He was actually a convert. He came from a nation called Edom. Sound familiar? Ovadia the Edomite. And he was given a very specific job of working for two of the worst people who have existed as a couple in Jewish history. Who would you say are considered the worst couple in Jewish history? Wow. You know your stuff. Someone's listening in yeshiva. Very good. Achav and Jezebel, or Jezebel. You know the expression Jezebel? This is what it's talking about. Achav was a king in Israel, and he just used his power. We talk about good kings all the time. Let's be honest. There have been some bad kings and leaders among the Jewish people, and Achav and his wife, Jezebel, were really, really bad. They were so bad that they made a decree that every single prophet, because the prophets were the ones who used to fight the kings, right? It's kings and prophets. Right? The king is always about, I need power, and I need money, and I need to do, and the prophet's like, no, if you do that, bad stuff's going to happen to you. So whenever you see fights in Tanakh, it's always the Malachim versus the Nevi'im, the kings against the prophets. And so the big problem with King Achav and Jezebel was all of these people, all these prophets were causing them trouble. So what are you going to do if you don't like people? What do great leaders and dictators do? They kill them. They kill them. Ovadia was an advisor. I believe he was some kind of like land advisor to Achav and Jezebel. And he took 100 prophets and he hid them in 2 caves. Because of this act, says Rashi, he was made, he became Jewish, he converted, and he became a prophet. So if you ever want to know, can a convert reach the highest levels of prophecy, which is a very high level of spiritual communion with God? Absolutely yes. Ovadia is the proof. So he comes along and he saves these prophets, and among them were prophets who actually we still know about in Tanakh, and he takes over from these people and he saves them all. And there were actually a number of prophets who are going to speak about the downfall of Edom. Now, we talk about Edom, it may not, it depends who you ask or who you read about, it may not include all of the descendants of Esav, and it probably doesn't. According to the Abarbanel, and those people who know me know that I always go with the view of the Abarbanel, it's talking about the very bad elements within Esav's descendants, which we know for sure, and Rashi is going to mention this, deals with Amalek. Amalek are the nation who hate the Jewish people so much that it doesn't make sense what they want to do to us. Other nations want to kill us and hurt us because they want our money, they want our land, right? They want our wives, our daughters, terrible stuff, but it's understandable. Amalek aren't like that. Amalek are the suicide mission people. They're the ones whose extreme desire, more than anything else, is to kill us, even at their own expense. The first time we see Amalek acting as a nation, which right now, they're not a full nation as we know it, they're not a unified whole, they're spread out among other nations, but I'm going to tell you how to identify them, because they exist everywhere. They exist all over the world, right? Over time, they've moved around, but whenever you see people who hate the Jewish people so much, they're willing to give their own lives up because of it, that is a midah of Amalek. When the Jewish people left Egypt, we were on a high. Everyone was scared of the Jewish people. You know what Amalek did? They came to attack us, knowing full well they were going to lose. Right? We had Moshe, we had Aaron, we had Miriam, right? We had Yoshua, we had everyone with us. We had the Torah. They were never going to, they knew that, but they didn't care. They wanted to cause enough pain, and they wanted to hurt us enough that other nations would be like, you know what? If Amalek can do it, and they were kind of successful in scaring the Jewish people, we can do it too, and we'll do a better job, which they did. So they really started anti-Semitism from when we left Egypt, which is a crazy time to start. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're just like landless. We have no money. We're just like walking through the desert, making our way to Israel. Amalek, we didn't touch the land. We didn't touch anything of theirs. They came to attack us. I had one of my great rabbis in yeshiva. Rabbi Bullman was his name, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. And when I was in yeshiva, there was a suicide bombing. And it was Friday night. And he said, I remember him doing this. He banged down. I'm talking 30 years ago, whatever it was. He banged down on the stender. And he said, we've all heard the news today. We don't mourn on Shabbat. But you should know, he said, that people who do this kind of thing, that is the seed of Amalek. That is a very, are they part of that nation? We don't know nowadays. One of Mashiach's jobs, actually, is going to figure out who isn't Amalek. He's got other jobs too, and to eradicate them. Hold on to that. Okay, we're going to see that. So that is the nation of Amalek. And everyone knows, of course, the very famous Amalekite that was Agag from the whole Purim story. Right? He's rich, he's famous, he's powerful, and yet one Jew won't bow down to him. I want every Jew dead. And he loses everything because of his absolute hatred, which just makes sense. He could have everything he wanted. He had everything he wanted. But the fact that one Jew wouldn't give him kavod, honor, that's it. Mordechai won't bow down to me. I want them all dead. And that led to his downfall. That's so Amalek. If you knew Amalek, that's so them. So that's what we're dealing with. Okay. So Ovadia is taken on the role as a prophet. And he was given, oh, by the way, we mentioned he comes from Edom. And he's about to prophesy about the descendants of Edom. There are many, many prophets, and they talk about different nations trying to hurt us. But his job was specifically to give the prophecy about the exact nation that he came from and about their downfall. Wow. Can you imagine that? He's left that nation, he's become Jewish, and now he's the guy who was chosen by God to become the prophet that's going to talk about his ex-nation's downfall. I don't know how to respond to that, but I'll tell you the expression or the mashal, the metaphor given by the rabbis. They say, if you look at a person who's chopping down wood in the forest, they use an axe made of wood. All right? That's how the rabbis explain it. I'm going to let that statement hang in the air, and you can download it into your minds any way you want. But the best way to chop down the trees is sometimes to use the wood that came from the tree itself. So you get the meshal, right? So basically, Ovadia is the wood of the axe, and he's going to come, he's going to prophesy about the end of days, about the breakdown of the descendants of Edom. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. There's 21 verses, and we're going to go through these verses, and I'm going to show you something which, by the way, you should know that what we're reading is also the Haftarah for Parashat. Which Parasha? Vayishlach. Right? It makes sense. There's always a thematic connection between the Parasha and Haftarah. The Haftarah basically is just pieces of Tanakh. Sometimes it goes by theme, sometimes by an idea, sometimes just like a word, right? Or some general. Here, the two are completely connecting. One, you're going to see, is a fulfillment and a continuation of the other. Okay, so let's get there. So Ovadia says, fine, we've seen what the descendants of Edom, of Esav, have done, right, to the Jewish people. And he's make references to things which at the time didn't make any sense, but the commentators tell us, you know what? These are references to the biggest catastrophe that Esav's descendants did against us. What's that? What stands out more than any other catastrophe that the Bnei Esav have done to us? The destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. Right? It was the Romans, who the rabbis seem pretty unanimous in describing as the descendants of Esav. That world, as they actually refer to Edom as Romi, as Rome. That's how they describe it. Edom and Romi are interchangeable. And by the way, to this day, the center of the Christian world, right, the Catholic Church, is actually still in Rome, right? It doesn't only mean that place or that location. It means people affiliate or act like that. That's what we're going to include in all this. And once again, we don't know exactly where Amalek are. And so, he talks about how there are various people who at the end of days are going to come and they're going to hurt the Jewish people. Okay? And let me just give you just a few words which I just picked up today. I mean, I've read through this Haftarah like at least once a year. But just listen to this and tell me if any of these words sound familiar to you. First of all, it says, you know what? On that day, they're going to be very, very wise people from Edom. Edom equals Esav, descendants of Esav, most likely specifically Amalek. And they come from the mountain of Esav. Now, the mountain of Esav, Har Seir, is like the southeast outside of Israel. That's really the location. But the location isn't so important. It may not involve that area. Happens to be that over here he says, yeah, there are going to be trouble coming from Giborei Teman, from very strong people at the end of days in Yemen. They're going to cause a lot of trouble for the Jewish people right before Mashiach comes. Not only that, and they're going to be wiped out, says Ovadia the prophet. When you're having trouble from Teman, now some people take that as a reference not to the location, but to the general southern part of Israel. We're going to be attacked from various people who are living outside of Israel, but from the south, southern borders. But it does say Yemen. It does say Teman. Okay, that's interesting. Verse 11 then says, and I'm going to say it in the English, and then I'm going to say it in the Hebrew. Okay? Your mighty ones to the south will be broken, so that every man is going to be cut off from the mountain of Esav by the slaughter. So they're going to come to attack us, and they're going to lose. That's Mashiach's job, because the oppression of your brother, they oppressed your brother, Yaakov. So he's like, took an Esav. Your descendants attacked your brother, right? And his descendants, Yaakov. Don't worry. You're going to be avenged, and disgrace is going to envelop you, and you're going to be cut off forever. Which most people believe to mean that Amalek are going to be wiped out and cut off forever. The word oppression in Hebrew, as used over here in Ovadia, describing the end of days, this final battle. Where's this battle going to take place? Mount Seir. This meeting, which Yaakov was meant to have with Esav in the parasha, didn't happen. But it's got to happen. It will at the end of days. And it's going to be an attack from various nations around the periphery of Israel, specifically Me Hamas. That's the word used, right, by Ovadia the prophet to describe oppression. Now, I guess for a long time, but we just thought, okay, fine. There are various people who are the oppressors, but Hamas didn't exist back then. But they do now. Chet, Mem, Samach. This is not gematria. This is not acronyms. That is the exact word to describe the oppression that the Jewish people are going to receive at the end of days from the descendants of Esav. Are Hamas the genealogical descendants of Esav? I don't know. But they got featured. And the ending for them, when Mashiach comes, is not going to be good. Okay? It says on that day, there are going to be a lot of strangers who are going to come and they're going to capture, right? And they're going to look at you, and they rejoiced. They rejoiced when they looked at you. Some say Esav has a really bad trait, or his descendants. Sometimes they don't actually get involved in killing us, but they watch from afar and they enjoy it. They weren't involved in the destruction of the first temple. That was the Babylonians. But the commentators tell us, yeah, that's true. They weren't involved. But you know what happened? They watched from afar and they rejoiced. And then after the war, they came and took our spoils. It's like, you know what it's like? The Nazis came and killed us. And they attacked us. And they took our property. And they took our art. And they took our money. And they took our lives, of course, which is worse than everything else. But then you know what happened? There were people who used to live in the towns nearby, right? Who came, who weren't Nazis, who weren't even German. Many were Polish. And they came in, and they plundered, and they took houses. Did you know? There were people who went back after the war. There's actually movies and documentaries about this, who went back to their homes after the war, after the Germans went, right? Truce came, Germans, they were out. And they went back to their homes, and it was taken by a Polish family, or sometimes a Ukrainian family. And they knocked on the door like, this is our house, right? They just managed to survive the concentration camps, and they got slaughtered. There were many such people. By those people who didn't want to give up their houses. Were they guilty for the Holocaust? Well, they weren't directly guilty for it, but they're part of it. In Judaism, you should know. Being a stand-by person who's just on the outside watching in, but not helping or saying or doing something, and definitely if they rejoice or take advantage of us in our low state, even mocking us, it's as though you're involved in it. And they're judged for that. So although most people in the world, I'd like to think, are not attacking the Jewish people, I'd like to think that, all the other people who are rejoicing online, making comments and demonstrating, they are culpable because they're giving chizuk, they're giving strength to those people who are attacking us. We see that's why Esav was actually held culpable for the first destruction, the first Beit HaMikdash, although they never did it. They did number 2, though. Right? Maybe that's what led to number 2. Maybe the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed right, by them because the first one was like, oh, this feels good. Let's go do it ourselves. That could be, although there's a big gap between. Anyway, that's what it says. Okay? By the way, just so you know, we did nothing to instigate Edom. When we left Egypt, we were set, God told us, stay away from this land. These people are troublemakers, and actually, we took weird detours on our way out. We don't like confronting. I know online you see nowadays the Jewish people are confronting, right? They're making out right now that we are the ones who are attacking Syria. I mean, they literally think that, I saw some guy, like a serious news channel, maybe it wasn't so serious, right, of some dude today saying, yeah, these rebels who overtook Syria, right, they're being paid by Israel. Are you crazy? Do you have any idea? They went on TV like, we're coming to Jerusalem to kill you Jews too. That's the first thing they said. Are you out of your mind? But this is the way people think. This is the absolute hatred. We don't confront, we move out of the way, right? But we have to protect ourselves. Okay. Let's go a little bit deeper, and then we'll try to tie this all together. We have to do a last piece over here. Okay, so the end of the prophecy, because this is pretty much it, it's only 21 verses or so. Ovadia said there's going to be a day when the nations are going to come to attack us. I will say the Abarbanel is rather unique in this, and he says this final battle may not be between the Jewish people and the other nations coming to attack us. Okay? Oh, by the way, what's that battle called? Gog and Magog. So most people say, yeah, it means they're going to come attack us, or these other nations coming to attack whoever Gog and Magog is, right? We said most likely, although we know actually, it's modern-day Iran, because they're called Paras by Ezekiel the prophet. So we know for sure they're involved in it. At least they're sending proxies to do it. But Abarbanel says it doesn't have to be us fighting them. It could well be, actually, he says it will be the bad people among the Arab nations who are going to fight the other forces among the Christian world. And we're going to be like in the middle of it all, right? Jewish people always find themselves right in the middle, being blamed by both sides for, success and failures. But that's how the Abarbanel understands the final battle that's going to happen on Mount Seir on this location. Fine. So this battle's coming in, and a lot of it's going to take place in and around Jerusalem, specifically on Har Zion. Do you know what Har Zion is a reference to? What's Har Zion? Mount Zion. What's Mount Zion? We have two mountains, Mountain of Seir and Mountain of Zion. It refers to Har HaBayit, right? The future temple, the future site of the third temple, and the site of the first and second Beit HaMikdash. We mentioned before, why is it called Zion, Zion? What's that word?
Because when you say you're Zion, it's like you're proud.
Proud. But what is the word? That's right. It came to refer to all of Israel, and lovers of Israel are called Zionists. But the word Zion actually comes from a couple of sources, but one of them is Mitsuyan, remarkable, amazing. That's it. This mountain and what happens on it is amazing. Zion is Mitsuyan. That's what Barbanel tells us about that particular word. Okay, fine. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is going to be full of Jews at this point, which it is right now, and we're going to find refuge there, and it's going to be holy, and the house of Jacob is going to be built over there. That means, by the way, it's a different opinion whether the Beit HaMikdash will be built before or after this event. We know that one of the jobs of Mashiach is to build the Beit HaMikdash, but some say actually it's going to start to be built beforehand and then finally built by Mashiach himself. Now that's interesting. Hard for me to understand that, but that's what it says. And then it says the following, and we're going to tie this all together and we're going to bring it up to date. Check this out. This actually is a very famous verse. This is something, I was in yeshiva, we didn't learn Tanakh, we didn't learn scriptures. They just taught us. I went to a very, very Haredi yeshiva. It was Gemara, a little parsha vort, right, at the end of the week, and then go home. It's a disservice. I couldn't believe. You know what? I'm embarrassed to say. I wasn't until my 20s I started opening up to there's a lot of stuff happening in here. All right, it's a great shame. Everything you need to about the past, present, and future is in Tanakh. It's all here. Anyway, so but this verse is quoted a lot, and I'm going to say it in English, and then we'll translate it into Hebrew. The house of Jacob, this is at the end of days, Ovadia speaking, this is right at the end of his prophecy. The house of Jacob is going to be fire. Okay. The house of Joseph, a flame. And the house of Esav we spoke about, is going to be straw, kash. I say in the Hebrew, V'haya bet Yaakov esh, bet Yaakov, descendants of Jacob are going to be fire, or bet Yosef lava are going to be like a flame, and bet Esav kash. What is this? Fire, flame. And why are we separating out Jacob and his son Yosef? That's really weird. We don't usually do that. It happens sometimes. Actually, it comes in different forms. Sometimes it's called Bet Yosef, and sometimes it goes by his son, Ephraim, who was given the bracha over his brother, Menashe. Remember the whole story? We're going to see later on. Right before Yaakov dies, he gives a bracha to all his kids and only 2 grandchildren, Menashe and Ephraim. And then Friday night, we bless our daughters, and God will you all will, B'ezrat Hashem, to be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and we bless our sons not to be like Avraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, that I would have thought would be the obvious thing, but to be like Menashe and Ephraim. Those 2 boys stand out. That's interesting. So they're called Ephraim, the children of Ephraim, right? And Ephraim was the son of Yosef. So those 2 terms are interchangeable. But for today's discussion, for us, they're the same thing. What's the difference between the children of Yosef and the children of Ephraim? Okay, so now we're going to have to go deep. So I need you to focus with me for a few minutes, and then we'll finish this off. It goes like this. We know that there was a split. When the Assyrians came to Israel, there was a split in the kingdom. Okay? 10 tribes went one way and were, as far as we know, lost to history. And the other tribes that we have, right, were the Jewish people that we still have today. We have a promise, and this is one of them, by the way, but others from the prophets, that the tribes of Israel are going to return. And they are headed by Ephraim, by Yosef, right, his father. From that group, where are these tribes? So this is a big question that I am personally fascinated with. There are many people alive today from various nations who say that we are from the original cast of the 10 tribes from the northern kingdom of Israel. What we have today are the Jews from the southern kingdom. Yeah, that's who we are, every Jew today pretty much. But there are many, many people out there who say, no, we're not part of that. We were split off but we still see ourselves as part of that original Jewish people. For example, there are groups in Ethiopia, right? There are groups in India, right? You say they're from Manasseh. There are many different groups around the world who claim, and some who don't claim but probably are, or possibly are, from these 10 tribes. One of the jobs of Mashiach, actually one of the things we're going to see before, during, and after Mashiach comes, is the return of these lost tribes. Now, each one of these two groups has a leader. One person who stands out. From the group of Yaakov, it is Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben David, he's going to be the leader, right, who is going to stand up from the Shevet Yehudah, right, Judah's the tribe, and he's going to stand up and he's going to be the final redeemer for the Jewish people. But how about the leader from this other group who are somewhere out there, or maybe they're with us, maybe they're really starting to, we don't know. And I don't know, so do not ask and do not send me emails on this because I don't know. But, the comments are crazy, but we do know what that leader is called. Mashiach ben Yosef. So let's go into this for just a couple of minutes. You may have heard that expression before, and the rabbis, the Gaonim, and others speak about this leader called Mashiach ben Yosef. And there's tradition in the more Kabbalistic writings, and actually see this in a lot of Sephardi Sidurim, the ones that have a lot of extra commentary, that one of the prayers we make actually in the Amidah is that Mashiach ben Yosef should not die at the hands of someone called Armilus. Who is that? We don't know. Maybe it's a gematria thing, maybe it's a name thing, maybe it's a meaning thing. I don't know, that's above my pay grade. But we know that we want Mashiach ben Yosef to survive, but he may die. Because he's going to come before Mashiach ben David and get stuff ready for Mashiach ben David. That's the Mashiach's arrival. So according to that, Mashiach ben Yosef is an actual leader who's going to bring a lot of these nations back. Because remember, he's going to be the flame. But Yaakov, that's the fire. It's going to finally really wipe out, right, the house of Esav, specifically Amalek. So we know that's his job. So we have these two people. Well, one has to be a person. Mashiach ben David, that's a given. He's a person, normal, flesh and blood, married, kids, Talmud Chacham, and he has various things that are to do. That's the Mashiach we always speak about. But how about this Mashiach ben Yosef? So some say, yeah, he's going to be a normal person as well, and he's going to be doing a lot of fighting before Mashiach ben David comes to get things ready. I will, however, tell you about one opinion that I read an essay on today. But I'd heard this and read it before in short, but I saw the whole thing. And this is Rav Kook. Rav Kook was one of the great rabbis who lived in Eretz Yisrael, considered to be one of the great leaders of the Jewish people. He says that Mashiach ben Yosef, since it's not really mentioned explicitly in Tanakh, does not need to be a person. He can be an epoch, a time. And what he says, in actually a speech that he gave, I believe, at the Hesped, the eulogy for Theodor Herzl, okay, that's where he actually went into this a little bit deeply, but we'll leave that aside. He actually said that Mashiach ben Yosef is not a person, it's a time, and what he saw was the fledgling Zionistic movement, secular. He got into a little bit of trouble for saying this, okay, but he was a great man, and I happen to agree with him. He saw the return of the Jewish people under this secular leadership. Okay? And when he saw that, he's like, he didn't say it was, but he says this movement that we're seeing that has grown a lot, right, over the past 70, 80, 90 years, right, from the first Aliyot in the early 1900s to where we are right now, right, we're seeing millions of Jewish people return, right, many people who want to return because of them. He says that's Mashiach ben Yosef. That's what's happening over here. So Mashiach ben David is going to come back after that movement has really reached its tipping point, which some argue actually is happening now, where it's starting to lose its fervor, right? People are seeing beyond that. It has served its role, its purpose, and now it's just lovers of Israel and the Jewish people, right? And we're seeing that movement start to fade, as it were, in a sense, and being replaced with something which I consider much, much greater, the love of God and Torah and the land of Israel. There's this movement in Israel towards that. I'm not saying Zionists don't exist nowadays. They mainly do, Baruch Hashem, and I consider myself one of them for sure. But now we're going post that. We're seeing something much bigger, different vision, something bigger, something more biblical, not short term. So that actually is how some of the commentators understand the words of Ovadia. What he's referring to when he pulls apart the descendants of Jacob and the descendants of Yosef. Oh, by the way, that interaction between Jacob and Yosef, right, came together at another time. Two other kings, Jewish kings, so they're both Jewish people. That's Yehuda and Yosef. You know they're going to face off in Egypt. You know the whole story with Yehuda? So one's the king of the Jewish people, and one is the ostensible king of Egypt. Yeah, he's the viceroy of Egypt. That's where Yosef gets to. So that interaction is also a preliminary event that's going to lead to this final coming together where they actually start to really work together in order to secure, because they weren't working together so much over there. They were nervous. There was a fight over there between them, you know what I'm saying? And they kind of like just moved on from it. But this is going to be the final culmination of Yaakov at Yehuda and Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef at this point. That's where we're going. Eventually, there's going to be, I'm not going to go into too much detail of it, but Israel's going to return. The Jewish people are going to return. There's going to be a judgment, whatever this means, on Mount Zion, and there's going to be a judgment against all those people who gave us trouble and hurt us throughout the centuries. That's going to occur. And Rashi says, and his final words on the prophecy of Ovadia is, that's going to be the final end of Amalek. When Amalek is done completely, that's when real peace, because all the problems of the world come down to a number of nations, but Amalek are the source of it all. Once they're gone, it's all over. All the other things are going to crumble, and the Bnei Yishmael are going to repent, and Amalek have to be wiped out. There's no repentance for them. Right? They've just done too much bad for them to be able to repent. Their hatred is too much. If they act like Amalek, there could be people to the Rambam who don't act like Amalek, and they can be left. But those who do and want to hurt us, they'll be wiped out. And that is what we're going to see right at the end of days, which, according to the prophet Ovadia, I think is happening right now. We'll stop over there. I told you it's going to be a deep dive. Questions, thoughts, comments, and anything? Yes, Natalie.
If I understood correctly, are there two different Mashiachs?
Yes. There are two different Mashiachs. Mashiach ben Yosef, who has a specific function and a job, and he's referenced in some places, but the real Mashiach, when we talk about Mashiach, we're talking about Mashiach ben David, right? That was the Yaakov version, and he's the real king of Israel. The other one is there to help. By the way, there are other Mashiachs in the Torah. There's a Kohen Mashiach. Doesn't mean he's the Mashiach. Mashiach means a person. The word Mashiach actually means Sarara Ugedula, a great, powerful leader. That's actually what Mashiach means. And there are people, even non-Jewish people, have the title Mashiach. Cyrus, we've spoken about him before, he's called Mashiach Hashem, because he's going to be a very great leader, which is why you see today various people who've taken on his position of being good to the Jewish people in the non-Jewish world. When you see people like that who come forward, I'm thinking of one person specifically, that's Cyrus, that's a spark of Cyrus's neshama. Yeah. So yeah, there are actually two Mashiachs who are going to work together at the end of days. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Yeah, sure.
So also by the numbers that you shared, that sounds like we have 22 tribes in total.
Why do we have 22 tribes?
10 lost tribes.
Oh, the remaining, no. So no, not 12. The 10 are from those 12 tribes.
Oh.
Those 10 are from those 12 divided up. All you pretty much have today is Shevet Yehuda. We're not too sure, okay? Again, I've been to many Ethiopians, and they believe they come from Dan, and Indians come from Menashe, I think, right? They have different people. But most Jewish people today are from Yehuda, right? And Shevet Levi, if they are Levim or Kohanim, because they were dispersed among all the areas of Israel. So there's only 12 tribes. Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? Yeah.
When you say the end of days, do you mean like the end of the universe?
Oh, no, Kim, I don't mean that. No, okay, fine. So, okay, you're new to this topic. No, we're talking about the end of days. Achar Yam, it doesn't mean the end of days. It means the days to come, the future time that is spoken about in the prophecies from Moshe Rabbeinu's time right till Malachi, and that means the world where Mashiach is going to come and make the world a better place, where there's going to be universal peace and love. It's just going to take a little bit of effort to get to that point. Just like in order to get life from a woman when she gives birth, you have to go through contractions. That's the exact metaphor called Chevle HaMashiach, the birth pains, the contractions of Mashiach. So before Mashiach comes, there has to be a lot of pain, and there has to be, in the world, specifically the Jewish people, in Israel, and throughout the entire world. And those pains don't only have to be physical. They can be emotional, psychological. They involve a lot of other things. Breakdown of the family unit. I've spoken about that a lot before. But all of those are precursors to Mashiach's arrival. It's all paving the way.
It's happening now.
Yeah, it is happening now. That's what I think. Yeah. Good. We'll stop over there. Rabbi Reuben is not on tonight, but there'll be pizza at the back, and you can hang out and mingle and do the Jewish thing. Okay, guys, thank you.